Welcome to the Mike Mazie Podcast, CEO of Trinity Strategic Wealth, former state senator, and Oklahoma Secretary of Finance. Mike talks with public policy and industry leaders about needed transformative changes to make Oklahoma a top 10 state for people to live, work, and retire.
Hi, everyone. We are back with another podcast with Mike Mazie as we continue to explore all sorts of very significant public policy issues. It's a good time of the year to take stock on what happened with the just completed Oklahoma legislative session. We're very pleased that we get to hang out with our friend, Representative Jay Steagall, who is a retired major from the Army, a decorated veteran, a small business owner. I recently learned his Renaissance man capabilities include music and music production. Fortunately for his constituents and for the state of Oklahoma, he's been in the state legislature for several years now, and he can give us a great overview on what I often call the good, the bad, and the ugly. So, Representative Steagall, thanks so much for hanging out with us today. It was a calm legislative session until right at the very end, and then there were some fireworks, but there were some significant positives. What stands out to you as the overall tenor of the legislative session and some positive accomplishments?
Well, thanks, Mike. I appreciate you having me on the podcast today. This is a really interesting question as far as, how we feel the legislative session went. And I think the best way to answer that is it really just depends on who you ask. Inside the building, there were some moments that were really, really smooth and things worked the way that the House wanted. Of course, that's where I'm at. There were also some wins over on the Senate side, and the governor's office obviously had some wins too. But then there's the relationship between the chambers and the governor's office. What I get to see firsthand, of course, is what's going on over in the House. And like I said, some of it went pretty smooth. The other parts of it were fairly tough. For the first time ever since I've been in the building, we implemented a two-tiered policy committee structure that in some senses made it easier for us to deliberate over policy bills before we took them to the floor if they survived both committees. And then in other instances, it worked against some members in the sense that, these higher tiers, these second tier policy committees, or these oversight committees, as we call them, were often burdened with more policy bills than they would have than they would have seen if they were just a regular standalone policy committee. So in some sense, it made it a little bit tougher for legislation to move. Some of that was mine, for example, got hung up in either the lower tiered policy committee or the oversight committee. But the good news is those bills are still alive for next year, so we can reattack them and take another look at them. But overall, the policy committee structure this year being different, like I said, it did give us a little more time to deliberate over legislation before moving it to the floor. And I'm a big proponent of the deliberative process. I think it's a very important piece to how we make policy, how we shape it, how we discuss it, and give it time to develop, marinate, and it fits well within the structure of our overall system of government anyway. The biggest benefit to that is it gives our constituents more opportunity to engage in that process as well. So anyway, that was one of the things that stuck out.
Now, surviving that gauntlet, I think, was some legislation relevant to your industry as a small business owner, the firearms and ammunition world. Did that make it through the final process in terms of sort of communicating to the world or to certain entities out there? You can't have your silly stuff, your silly woke stuff in Oklahoma.
Well, the bill that I was able to successfully get all the way to the governor's office, and of course he signed into law, was House Bill 2818. And it revamped the way that we look at castle doctrine and stand your ground doctrine as far as our Self-Defense Act goes.
Okay.
Of course, anytime we restore the rights of the individuals, particularly anything that's firearm related, it is going to have an impact on the industry itself, but we would expect that no matter what the industry was. The biggest win, though, in that entire situation are our constituents. The bill basically, to summarize it, extended the definition of our castle doctrine all the way to the edge of our own properties now. So it's not just our homes that castle doctrine applies to, it's all the way up to the edge of our properties. Good. That's a huge, huge thing for us. And it restores the individual's rights to protect themselves according to the way our state constitution is written, which is not just themselves, but their property and their possessions as well. And that's already enshrined in our state constitution. So the legislation just brings that Self-Defense Act up to consistent language with our constitution.
Good. There were some interesting business-friendly debates, particularly on the tort reform side. Back when I was in the state Senate, we passed a series of Let's Make Oklahoma More Business-Friendly reforms, workers' comp reform, and lawsuit reform. Our lawsuit reform tried to deal with the problem of Oklahoma being a very litigious state and a sort of central point for people to come and file lawsuits. And as part of that lawsuit reform, we did a cap on non-economic damages, but that got thrown out by the somewhat liberal Supreme Court. It sounds like this year you guys corrected that flaw, and now there's a reasonable cap in place. Where did the cap end up?
I don't remember the exact number. I'd have to go.
I think it was $500,000.
That rings a bell. It could be. I'd have to go pull that language up and find it again. But to your point, and thank you for initiating the work on that. Just a few years ago, you and your colleagues were trying to do us a solid as a state and setting us up for success and help eliminate some of these burdensome costs on our constituents. And of course, when we were able to pick that up this year and make another twist on it, give it another run, it was the same intent. At the end of the day, we've got to find ways to help reduce the cost of these lawsuits or the outcomes of them.
And these new business courts, what's your take on those? That was a priority for Governor Stitt. Now we're going to be one of a handful of states that has business courts.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good thing. The states that have already implemented this type of court system are seeing the benefits of it already, and that that particular court can handle that type of specific case and get these businesses some resolution, sometimes a little bit quicker and a little less costly, so that they can get back to serving their customers, obviously. But having that business court system in place is obviously a big thing when we're taking a look at how do we be competitive with these other states that have implemented those types of court systems and how they're handled, what the outcomes are, what the time of the overall case, how long all that lasts. Business owners want stability, and they want action taken swiftly. They don't have time to be in court all day every day. So let's make the system more friendly to those types of situations, so that those business owners can get back to doing what they do best, and that's making products or delivering services to their customers.
So there was a tax cut. You all cut the income tax rate from 4.75% to 4.5%. So lower taxes for the hardworking people of Oklahoma is always a good idea. There was also, quote unquote, a path to become a no income tax state that seems a little bit lengthy in potential nature. How do you think that'll pan out, and what did you think of that particular approach to becoming a no income tax state, which, as you know, I'm a big fan of and have written extensively about how to make it happen in a 3 to 6 year period?
No, and here again, Mike, I want to applaud you for your efforts on that in years past. I know you not only initiated some of those tax cuts, but were able to get some of those passed. So what we were trying to do is pick that torch up and run down the road with it a little bit further. So I'll give you a little bit of background on where I was as far as the tax cut itself goes. I filed a bill multiple times over the last few years that would put us on a path to zero, but it was a fixed length of time. It was a 10-year plan. And of course, that puts the legislature in the position where over those 10 years, they would have to take a look at what it is that we're really after here. And the tax cut path to zero on our income taxes is priority number one. Number two, though, is tax reform. So many people in the building, and a lot outside of the building too, believe that tax cut itself, a tax cut, is tax reform. And of course, you and I both know that that's not the case. Mm-hmm. So it gives, over that 10-year period, it gives the legislature a chance to take a look at our tax structure itself, streamline it, look for efficiencies, and reduce other costs where we can find them. Anytime that we can sit down and evaluate our system, you and I do this both as business owners, we're looking for efficiencies. We enter into what's called the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, and act. And
what's that phrase?
The OODA loop, O-O-D-A.
That's a little more fun to say than a SWOT analysis, the OODA loop. I'm going to have to remember the OODA loop.
The OODA loop. So as an organization, we need to be entering into this OODA loop constantly to look for these efficiencies to identify, and that helps us identify fraud, waste, and abuse in areas where maybe we expect it, maybe sometimes where we didn't expect it. But fraud, waste, and abuse identification helps the organization reach further efficiencies and reducing overall costs. Of course, that means we're better stewards of the taxpayer dollars. And in most cases, what we should be looking at is ways to give that back to the taxpayers themselves. Because obviously, if it's fraud, waste, and abuse, we didn't need that money to begin with. Yeah. But the 10-year plan was something that I introduced multiple times and ran into a few hurdles along the way with it, like one, just even getting the bill heard. The only time I had an opportunity to present the bill was, I believe it was last year. It was Representative Scott Fatgater that gave me the opportunity to present it in his finance committee. But no hearing on it this year. However, my good friend and colleagues, Mark LePack and Jared Kendricks, but both these guys are rock solid conservatives and look for other ways to accomplish the same means. The bill that they were able to get some consensus with the Senate did put us on a path to zero. Like you mentioned earlier, it does take a lot longer. In the fact that this is not a fixed period of time in which this income tax rate is going to be reduced to zero. It's all based on triggers, and the trigger is an excess in collections. And I believe the number that they settled on was $400,000, which means that we have to over-collect in order to justify a tax cut. My proposal on this was, if you force the tax cut, then you force the organization to look for ways to not spend more than what they're allocated. They look for those efficiencies themselves. If we are relying on the taxpayer themselves to generate enough revenue in excess for us to justify cutting their taxes, then my opinion is we're hiring the wrong people to run our agencies. We need to hire people that run our agencies and look for efficiencies and ways to save the taxpayer dollars instead of depending on the taxpayers themselves to come up with the revenue to generate what it is that this agency is going to spend. As you and I both know, the fiscal policy that we have in our entire system of government is the worst type of fiscal policy to have, and that's that we have to run ourselves broke each year to justify next year's budget. Mm-hmm. So let's maybe take a look at this. My opinion was let's take a look at another approach to this. Let's force the issue. Let's get in there and roll our sleeves up. I think we got plenty of talent in the building. This was an opportunity for those that really wanted to roll their sleeves up and get in there and do the Lord's work and identifying fraud, waste, and abuse to do so. But here's what we settled on. I supported Representative LePac's bill, sure, because it did give us something on the books to move towards. And of course, you and I both know that legislation can be changed and amended over time to get what it is we need to get to. So I was glad to support the idea. The hardworking folks in Oklahoma not just only deserve the tax cut because of the economic pressures that we're all dealing with, but I'm, as you know, a strict constitutionalist. And when we take a look at Article 2, Section 2 in our state constitution, it says all persons have the inherent right to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and this other little thing that we tend to overlook, and that's the enjoyment of the gains of their own industry. So really, a state income tax is in violation of our own state constitution.
That's supposed to tax our hardworking labor. And the difference between your era and my era is I couldn't hardly get anybody to even talk about Oklahoma becoming a no income tax state. So I applaud you all for the progress and the debate. I'm not particularly a big fan of this particular path because when you set it, to your point, based upon revenue, when we're pretty much at all-time peak revenue in the history of the state of Oklahoma, it means it's going to be really hard to have revenue growth going forward. And to get from 4.5 to 0, you'd have to have 18 instances of tax collections above the threshold, which is, I don't know, 2 years for at least all 18. We're talking 30 years to make it happen if it does. Having said that, I'm just really grateful that everyone's having the discussion because we're at a significant competitive disadvantage versus the no income tax states. And pretty soon here we'll be launching an idea, to your point, on how do we look at state agencies and get them operating a little bit better, because we have reams of reports from the auditor and the Incentive Evaluation Commission and your own legislative office of fiscal transparency, where we could save hundreds of millions of dollars. So there is a quicker way to do it, but I applaud the progress. Normally every legislative session, Representative Steagall, there's something that's a misstep or a mistake, or it just doesn't come to pass, or some priority doesn't get addressed. I was personally disappointed by the reduction in funding for career tech by 8.8% when we were still pretty close to all-time highs of tax collections. And from what I hear all over the state, job creators, small business owners, they're really struggling to fill their empty work spots with qualified individuals. And, our career tech system is one of the best in the country. Why do you think they ended up with, almost a 9% funding decrease?
Well, that's a good question. I actually went back and took a look at the appropriations over the last few years for the State Board of Career and Tech Ed. And the House has got a really cool tool. I'll send you a link so you can share it with all your viewers, but it's the budget transparency portal that the House puts out.
That is a really good new item the last couple of years. I have looked at it a little bit, but haven't dived into all the details yet.
It's really neat. It allows our constituents to see, where we're at in the House on a particular subject, where the Senate's at, as well as what the budget requests were for each of these subsidiaries. And when we take a look at what it was that Tech Ed had requested versus what they had been appropriated over the last few years, then the reduction of that nearly 9% starts making sense. It looks like we had over appropriated in the last couple of years and had simply clawed some of that back in order to meet one of the governor's points of, hey, let's try to run a flat budget this year without, bloating things up like we have. And you and I both know what tends to happen when we over collect in tax dollars as we grow government. There's only one way to deal with excess revenue collection, and that's to spend it, typically as a system of government. Hopefully we've addressed some of that with a small tax cut, but we had to stop the hemorrhaging somehow. So I'm going to give a little bit of credit here to our A&B folks that worked really, really hard to make sure that we ran a fairly flat budget this year. And I know some of this looks a little funky, but the agency, it looks like we kind of got them back down to what they had asked for in years past. Okay. Now, to your point, I like to share this story with folks. In Saturday night, we had our 30-year high school reunion. A bunch of us got together down in Chickasha.
You don't look old enough for a 30-year high school reunion, Jay Steagall.
Well, I graduated when I was 6.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you are brilliant. Yeah, I forgot.
But I went to high school with a couple of folks that went to Votech while they were in high school for a few years. And when they graduated school, they found a great job working in the oilfield industry. We're making great money. And what did I do? I went off to college. And I had some scholarship money, had some help from my folks, but a year into this, I realized I'm going to need more money to help pay for college. So I went off and joined the military. When I graduated college, I still had some student loan debt to take care of. Meanwhile, the folks that went to Votech didn't have that kind of debt. They didn't have any other obligations other than the normal family obligations that we're all going to have. And they're living a great life and doing really well, and still doing really well today. And the point there is, there's a need for these trade skills, and there's an opportunity for us to focus on that. And I'm not suggesting that we forego the opportunities for those that want to go to college, but I think we need to really emphasize the fact that not everybody necessarily needs to go to college. We need to let students make those decisions themselves. Hey, what is it that you want to do when you grow up? I remember when I was a kid, my mom asked me, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I said, Mom, I want to grow up and be a pilot. And she just laughed and said, we're going to have to pick one. You can't do both. So I'm still growing up.
Okay.
But anyway, no, I think there's a real need for us to focus on the trade skills, and our Votechs and that Tech Ed is a good place for us to focus on providing those services to our students that need them.
Yeah, it's hard to find the right balance, obviously, between higher ed funding and career tech funding and K through 12 funding. And I do know the budget folks at Capitol take all that very seriously. Having said that, 65-70% of our students are not going to go finish a college degree, and so I think we need as a state to start looking more and more at career tech's got a waiting list of 7,500 students, and job creators can't get positions filled, and maybe we do actually need to start tilting the needle a little bit more towards career tech, because those jobs are just in demand right now in healthcare and aerospace and electricians. Nobody's got enough electricians in the state of Oklahoma, let alone plumbers. Plumbers can make a lot more money than these kids coming out of college with these big school loans. I have these employees of mine that are married to plumbers, and they're doing pretty well, Jay.
A great living.
I'll keep preaching that. I know it's important to you as well. I saw a fascinating program just the other day at High Plains Career Tech, where they've used their internal funding to back the train up a little bit. They've got 6th through 10th graders now participating annually in a career tech program. They call it the Technical Application Program. I think it's a great model that we should start looking at all over the state, because it exposes our students to all these different options as they learn about the options for colleges. So maybe a little, more quickly than Jay Steagall, they can grow up and become a pilot. So your mom sounds like a very wise one. But we're grateful that you spent some time with us today. And we hope this conversation and these positive accomplishments by the legislature are great for the people of Oklahoma, and creating new jobs and growth and prosperity. Until the next time we have a podcast with Mike Mazie, have a super blessed day.
Welcome to the Mike Mazie Podcast. CEO of Trinity Strategic Wealth, former state senator, and Oklahoma Secretary of Finance. Mike talks with public policy and industry leaders about needed transformative changes to make Oklahoma a top 10 state for people to live, work, and retire.